Hello everyone. In this video we will take a look at how Ionic Angular works in the JAMstack. So by JAMstack I mean we mostly want to pre-render our website or application at the build time, and then the static assets that we generate at the build time we can actually host them on any static web hosting such as Netlify or Vercel. And we are going to be using Scully in this case, so that is actually the first static site generator for Angular. So we will see how we can pre-render our entire application with Scully, and also how we can pre-render the dynamic routes. So if we go to our application here, so this is what we are going to be building. So we have this application that is running, and that is running on the local server. And if we see, we have these ToDos, and once we click on that we will actually be seeing the single ToDo. So if I view the source of this application, so we only have this app root, so that is not much helpful for the search engines. And then second one we have, this is actually the pre-rendered version of this application, and that is built with the help of Scully. And now if I view the source of it, you can see we are getting this entire content here, right? So now search engines should be able to crawl through this content. So this is kind of very helpful in the case of, let's say, blog, or let's say you're creating a portfolio website. And also if you're creating a blog, you're not often actually changing it that much, so that is perfect use case for using something like Scully for pre-rendering your application. So you can actually create a blog in something like Ionic Angular, and then you can pre-render it with the help of Scully. So let's see how we can create this application. So to get started, first we need to install Angular and Ionic CLI globally on our local machine. For that we will use npm install -g at ionic/cli and angular/cli. And now this will go ahead and then install the Angular and the Ionic CLI on our local machine, and then we can actually use the Ionic and the Angular commands from anywhere in our system. Now once that is done, we can change the directory where we want to create our Ionic project. And then we can do Ionic start and then the name of our application, and I will name it Ionic JAMstack, and then the template that we want to use. So we have couple of options. We can use blank, tabs, side menu, right? But I actually want to use blank, so let's type blank here, and then we can actually select the framework of our choice. I want to use Angular, and we don't want to actually integrate capacitor. So with the capacitor we can actually use the native functionality of the application. So but in this example we are mostly going to be covering the web app, so we don't need that. So now this will actually go ahead and then install the dependencies for our project. So this might take some time, so I will be back when it finishes. Now we can change the directory to our newly created project, and then we can open the project inside of our editor. As I am using Visual Studio Code, so that's why I have typed code. So here you can actually see our Ionic application, and if I open the terminal by pressing Ctrl and tilde sign, so we can actually type Ionic serve. So this will go ahead and then build our project for the first time, and then it will open it inside our browser. So now you can see we are getting this browser window opened at localhost 8100, and if we see in the browser we can actually see our Ionic application. As you can see, I am getting the dark theme here. This is because I am actually using the dark color theme inside of the Windows settings. And by default Ionic uses a theme that is default to the system, so that's why it is dark. And if I, let's say, change it to light, so you can see instantly this is actually changed to the light theme. So let's actually keep it dark here, and if I close this and we go to the editor, And if I open variables.scss, we can actually change it here. If I scroll down a bit, so in the prefers color scheme, if we change it to light, right, so this will change it back to the light color theme, right? So maybe let's keep it to dark, and maybe let's continue with the application. So we are going to be creating this ToDos application. So I am going to be using this REST API JSON placeholder.ipcode.com, and if we go to /ToDos here, we should be able to see the list of 200 ToDos, and if we hit that URL with the GET request, we should be able to get this. And when we go to ToDos /any ToDo ID, we should be able to see the single ToDo, right? So now let's say if I add /2 here, then I am getting this ToDo with the ID of 2. So let's use it, and once that is done, we will actually see how we can use Scully to pre-render this at the build time. And then once we deploy our application, we no longer need to connect to any server, right? So let's go back to our editor and let's open the new terminal window here. So we can actually generate our page with Ionic generate page, and let's name it ToDos, and let's press yes here. And now we can actually see inside of our app we have this ToDos directory, and we also need ToDo for showing the single ToDo. And here we can see we have ToDos and the ToDo. Maybe let's add to the Git. So let's clear it, and next we can do, so maybe let's go here, and if we take a look at app.routing.module.ts, so inside of that we have this home page, ToDos and ToDo. So these are the one that we have created now, and in here we can see when we go to the root path, so this is redirecting to the home. Maybe let's change it to the ToDos. So by default it opens a ToDos page. And now if I go back to our browser and I go to the root of our application, we should be able to go to ToDos. And if I go to /ToDo, so then we have this our ToDo page. So if we go to ToDos, todos.page.html, so here we have ToDos. So if we change it to ToDos, and this one too, let's say single ToDo, so that should be more clearer. So if I go here, so we have this single ToDo, and if you go to ToDos, we have this ToDos. And next, if you go to ionicframework.com, and in here let's go to developer and UI components, and let's see which component do we want to use. Maybe we can actually use a list. So we will actually go to this component to show our ToDos. So we will create something like this. Yeah, so let's actually use this one, and then we can go here and inside of our ToDos page.html, maybe we will paste it here, right? And now if we go back to our application, we should be able to see our ToDos. So by default this will actually take the entire screen. So what we can do is we can actually make use of Ionic Grid. So if I do iGrid, so actually I'm using the snippets here. So these are actually available for VS Code. I will actually show it in a second. So if we go back to our application now, so we can see this is actually showing in a grid, and then this won't take the entire screen width. So now this is actually showing it inside of, let's say, a container here. And eventually we will be replacing these static items with these to-dos. So let's see how we can do that now. So first we will go ahead and then generate a service. So Ionic generate service, and then we will actually name it data. So here we can see we have this data service, and inside of that we can actually include our HTTP module, but first we need to import it inside of our app module. So here we can do import from @Angular common HTTP, right? And what do we want to import? So that will be HTTP client module, right? So now we have to add this import inside of our imports array, and now we should be able to use it inside of our data service. So here we can do HTTP and HTTP client, and here we will see auto import from Angular common HTTP. So we will click that, and this will actually add the import here at the top, and we will actually create a method. Let's say GetDeuce, right? So we won't be actually using any interface here, but we can do something like maybe ToDos. So then we can create an interface for that, but I won't be creating that now. So let's say we will do return HTTP, actually this dot HTTP dot get, and let's hard code the value here for that to-dos. Right. So now we can save it, and inside of our to-dos page.ts, now we can actually inject our service. So that will be data service, and maybe let's name it service, and let's actually create to-dos, and then inside of our ng on init we can do this dot to-dos equal to this dot data service dot get to-dos, right? And inside of our to-dos page.html, now we can do, so we will actually remove these items, and then we can actually use ng4 let to-do of to-dos, and maybe let's have a look at the API. So that will be to-do.title, and as we are not subscribing to the observable here, so we need to use the async pipe, right? The other option will be to subscribe to that, and inside of that subscribe we can do this dot to-dos equal to whatever we get back from the observable, right? So now if we go back here, so we are getting an error here. So let's see. So we have this dot data service dot get to-dos is not a function. So sometimes this happens, we might need to restart our server. So let's do that. Now let's add a forward arrow at the end here also. So if we go to ionicons.com, maybe let's search for arrow, we forward, So I actually want to use this icon. So once we click that, we can click here, so that will be copied. And now inside of our ToDos page.html, and after the label we can add that, and I will actually add another property, slot equal to end, so that will actually add it at the end. Okay, so now you can see we have this icon at the end also. And let's also make use of our completed property here. So we will make use of Ionic badge. So I will add here in the label I badge, right? Maybe let's make use of our ToDo dot completed, right? Maybe first let's check if it is working or not. Okay. So based on actually the completed property, we actually want to show completed or pending here. So let's see how we can do that. So I will go here and maybe let's actually check for the completed property here. So we will use ngIf here, right? So if it is completed, then we want to show completed, right? And if it is not completed, maybe let's use the another color, that is danger, so that will be something red. And now we want to make it let's say pending, right? So now we can save it, and here we can see whichever to do is pending, we can see this state, whichever one is completed, we have this state, right? So that is actually working for every to do. So now let's implement something like, if we go to click this to do, so that will go to ToDos slash this ID, right? So we will go here, maybe let's add it here, finish ToDo page, and inside of our app routing module.ts, so for ToDos let's use ToDos slash ID. So ToDos slash any ID, we want to go to our ToDo page, right? So if we go to our ToDo page.ts, so maybe let's go back to our application. So if we go to ToDos slash 1, so now we should be able to see our single ToDo page, and if it is 2, then again we should be able to see single ToDo, right? So now let's get this dynamic ID inside of our ToDo page. So we will make use of activated route module or method. So we will do activated route. So we will import it from Angular router, and here inside of our ng on init, we can make use of this dot activated route dot snapshot dot param map dot get, and we want to get the ID because we have this ID as a dynamic property here, right? So maybe let's first output it to the console, maybe let's see if it is working or not. And now if we go back here and maybe let's open the developer tools here, maybe let's actually click on this toggle device toolbar, so that will open it inside of maybe let's say, actually yeah, iPhone X is fine, so I will refresh it, right? So if we go to ToDos slash 1, we can see 1 here, and if we go to ToDos slash 2, we can see 2 here, right? So let's now fetch this ToDo with the ID of 1, 2 and so on. So we can make use of this URL slash 1, and then we will make this dynamic. And now inside of our data service, we will see get ToDo, and here we will actually pass a ID, and then we will return this dot http dot get and instead of this one we will use the dynamic ID, and I am using this template string syntax here, so that's why you can see I am using tilde here, not the single quotes here. Okay, and now if we go back to our ToDos page, no, todo.page.ts, so we will actually inject our data service, and here we can make use of, maybe let's add it here, todo, and then I will do this dot todo equal to this dot data service dot get todo, and then we have to pass our dynamic ID here that we are getting from prem map, right? So now if I go to our todo page.html, and I will actually copy the code from todos page.html, and maybe let's show it there, right? So inside of our todo page we will do that, and now we don't need ng4 here, and I will actually remove the list here, right? And here we can do, and here we can make use of ng if, so maybe let's use it here. todo and then async as todo, right? So now we will make use of this todo, and I don't need that, and here we can do, and let's actually maybe rename it to ToDos and then $sign. So this is actually recommended practice to use $sign as a suffix to the observable. So inside of our todo page, now I will rename it to todo, right? I am actually not sure about this error, but let's actually take a look at inside of the browser. Yeah, so this seems to be working. So if I go to maybe let's say 24, okay, so I'm getting different todo here. So I guess maybe if we do something like this, right? So that should fix it. Okay, right. So if we see here, yeah, so this seems to be working. So if someone can tell me in the comment section why it didn't work with the dot syntax. Yeah. So next we can go to our ToDos, and then we can actually add the router link. So once we click on certain todo, so this will actually take us back to our ToDos page. So here you can see this is actually not showing maybe all the badges here, so maybe let's move it to the start, so that will show for like every todo. So instead of showing it here, I will move the title at the end. Hopefully that will fix it, right? So now let's go back to our todos page.html, and if we click on, let's say, any item, then we want to move to, let's say, a router link, and we want to go to slash ToDos. Maybe let's add in a different syntax. So let's use router link here, and then we can just define our route, then slash todo.id, right? So if I save it and we go back to the browser here, and let's click on any to do. So that will take us back to the single to do, right? So one thing you might have noticed is this has actually automatically created these arrows for us. So I guess we can remove the ones that we have added. So I think we build the Ionic, if we add this router link, so this automatically adds it. So I will actually remove that, and here we should be able to see this, right? And we don't actually need it inside of our to do. So I will remove it here, also this one. Okay, so now if we see for our to-dos, so we are getting this, and if we go to to-dos, so we have these arrows, right? So this seems okay. So now let's talk about how we can pre-render it. So currently what is happening, so whenever we open our application, so that will make a request to this API JSON placeholder.ipcode.com/todos. So every time when we open this, so now what we want to do is we want to pre-render all these to-dos as maybe separate HTML pages at the build time. So to do that, we will make use of Scully. So if we go here, maybe let's add finish to-dos. So we will actually close our terminal here, and to add Scully to our project, we will do ng add at scully.io/init. So this will go ahead and add Scully to our project. So if we go to scully.io, here you can see wicked fast Angular. Scully makes building, testing and deploying JAMstack apps extremely simple. So what it does is, this is actually a static site generator for Angular, and this is actually the first one. We do have Angular universal pre-render, but the Scully is actually, we can say, first in Angular that portrays itself as a static site generator. So if we go to our terminal here, so you can see this has already added Scully to our project. So if we close that, and now if we see in the maybe Git tab, so we have this package.json updated, and then we have this Scully app.config.ts here, and here we have actually defined the root of our project name and output directory. So for Ionic project, the root is still the same as the Angular. The project name is coming app here, so we will get to that in a second. And then for the output directory, we are using this/static. And if you know, with Ionic, once we build the project, it adds it inside of www directory, but we can still make use of dist/static to host our static assets. So now we will do, so let's add Scully, and also if we go to app module.ts, this has actually added Scully lib module to our app module, right? So now what we can do is we can run Ionic build. So first, to run Scully, we need to build our Angular or Ionic project. So this works the same in any Angular project also. So once we build that, we will have a www directory here in a second. And here you can see we have this www directory. So this actually contains the build of our Ionic application, right? And once this is done, we should be able to actually run Scully after that. So if we run npm run Scully, so that will go ahead and then scan for any routes in our application that it can find, and then it will try to pre-render them. So if you go to package.json, so we have this Scully and Scully serve script here, so that's why I'm able to run npm run Scully. So here you can see we have this no configuration for route todo/id because that is a dynamic route. So we will get to that in a second. And here you can see we have this home, then this home route, actually the route one, and then the ToDos. So these are actually pre-rendered here. So if I go here and then open this in a terminal, and if we try to open it with the HTTP server, I'm using npx, so I don't need to install it. So now here we can see our Ionic application, and now that is pre-rendered. So by that I mean, if I view the source of it, you can see we are getting everything here, right? So we can see all the content, so that will be helpful in the case of SEO. And if I go here in this application and if I view the source here, so you're only seeing the app route here. And as it didn't find, let's say, any routes for ToDos/1 and 2, because these were dynamic routes, in that case we have our Angular application, so that is not pre-rendered. So now let's see if we want to pre-render our ToDos/ all these routes. So what we can do is, so I will minimize it, and inside of Scully app config.ts we can actually define the dynamic routes here. So we will go to /todos/id, so that is our dynamic ID. And here we want to actually use the plugin, so that is a JSON plugin. And for our dynamic ID, this ID, we will actually define the URL, so that will be the URL of our type code. And inside of that we will define property. So if I go here, so that will be the URL where we are going to be fetching our ToDos, right? And for the property we want to use the ID property, right? So that is a dynamic one. So that ID property refers to this ID, right? And then this ID and this ID, so that corresponds to ToDo/then ID, right? So if I save it and let's close it, and let's maybe build, and then after we will run npm run Scully. So every time you need to run Scully, most of the times you need to run Ionic build, so that's how you can combine it. So now we are actually still getting this route for ToDo/id not found. I guess we need to add the / here, so maybe let's save it and let's run Ionic build and Scully. So I think we didn't need to add build this time because we haven't changed anything in our build. So maybe if that is the case, you can directly run npm run Scully. So now this time you should be able to see this is actually pre-rendering these routes ToDo/1 2 3. So we actually have around 200 ToDos, so that might take some time. So now this is going ahead and then maybe pre-rendering all of them. So here if we refresh it and then hit Ctrl U, so we have this content. Okay, and now if we go to our editor and let's close this, and inside of this static and inside of ToDos, so you can see we have all these folders here, right? So these are all the ToDos that we have, actually 200 if we see in the last. And if we go here and if we click on 2, So these are actually just the index.html files inside of this folder. So if you see, if we go to ToDos, we should be able to see the index.html that is at the root here. And let's go to if ToDos /200, so then the index.html. So any static website hosting should be able to recognize this. And the benefit of this is we are no longer making the request to the server for unnecessary data. These ToDos are actually not going to change that much. So this is actually a very good use case to statically render your website or application. The another use case will be to create a blog, or let's say a portfolio website which doesn't change that often. So then we can actually make use of Scully to pre-render it. So actually that's it. So maybe that's how we can actually use or make use of Angular and Ionic in the JAMstack with the help of Scully.